on my own. I feel the rain crashing down all around this empty town. I'm searching for the lost and found, but you don't care, you're unaware. Keep moving like the scars aren't even there. It's in the air like a blazing flare. Just stare 'cause the flames won't burn us.
Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today I'm doing What If Deku Had the Attack Titan, Part 1. If you guys do enjoy this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. And while you're at it, United States of smash the bell icon to be notified when I post a new video. I have been doing some streams recently, so if you want to have the chance to play with me, or even just get to ask some questions you may have on your mind, because I know I don't always read your guys' comments or reply, so if you guys do indeed want to have a question answered, make sure you guys join me on my streams. So yeah, 2 people from those streams have been added as moderator. So, I would like to introduce Mizea Omega and Diamond Boy Gaming. Thank you both for joining my stream moderators committee or whatever. And let's just real quickly have a toast to my 2 new moderators. Cheers to you guys. And welcome to UA High. So, yeah, if you guys want the chance to be able to become a moderator like them and get a toast in your honor, make sure you guys show up to my streams, because these 2 people have been showing up to my streams and have been around for a while. So yeah, I just wanted to give them a congratulations and welcome them to my stream moderators committee. Basically, I don't know, just whatever. So back to the what if. So Deku's dad is basically a long descendant of the Queen in Attack on Titan. Like, he is the youngest descendant. And we're gonna start with him. So when Deku's dad was a kid, his mom would his grandma would always tell him stories that her mom told her, and then her mom's mom told her. And this is just a great line of stories, and his grandmom would always tell him these stories of these giant monsters, big walls, big cities, and great loss of life. Deku's dad would always be so fixated on these tales that she would talk about, almost as if they were real. He would always ask his grandma if these stories were real, and she would always say they weren't, but somehow they seemed so real, so historically accurate, with somehow they tied in with real world events. every night after she would tell a story, he would go to bed wondering if they really were real. Because they were just so real. Deku's dad wanted to be a historian. Or no, an archaeologist. Because he wanted to find out if these stories that his grandmom would always tell him were real. And that was his life's goal. To find out if her stories were actually real. Because for some reason, he just didn't believe his grandmom. Despite her saying that they were fake stories, they somehow were real. So, every year from the first story and from when he got his cork, he would be digging up their backyard. He would be at old historical places. He would be in the library constantly. So when he finally gets to college, he gets to the college he wants to be in, and he goes on his first archaeologist mission. He searches the entire place, digs up the entire area. Nothing. Then Deku is born. His life's goal had totally switched from finding out if the stories were real to caring for his family. So one day, he's, just kind of sitting in his desk, reading up on archaeologist places and how people are making such grave discoveries and all that stuff, when he gets a mission, or job, whatever they call them, to go investigate and unearth a giant wall. Almost 100 meters tall wall. Deku's dad remembers the story and thinks about how his grandmom talked about a great wall that would keep out the giant monsters. So he heads there and he starts unearthing the entire place. He basically forgot all about Inko and Deku, because he spent 2 years unearthing that place, and he found what he thought was a giant head, a giant skull. Deku's dad immediately thought about the stories, and he checked it for bone marrow. There was bone marrow. So he took, he got a syringe and a needle and got all the bone marrow out of it. He noticed it was only a little bit, but it was enough to run tests on. So Deku's dad tells everyone about his discovery and gets in his car, drives to the airport, and heads straight back home. So right now, Deku is about 4 years old. So now, we are going to switch back over to Deku. So, Deku is so excited to go and find out if he has a cork or not. And just as they're about to leave, Deku's dad arrives. Deku is extra excited because he rarely gets to see his dad anymore. And Deku and his dad share a big bear hug, and they get in the car. They drive to the hospital, and Deku can almost feel himself diving into lava as the doctor tells him that he doesn't have a quirk. Deku drops his toy and feels the excitingness, the happiness of finally finding out if he had a quirk and what it would be, to just sinking depression. I have crippling depression. I'm sorry, I had to do it. And Deku just kind of blacks out as he just sits there with a wide mouth. Like his jaw is just dropped as Inko sees a tear drop down his face. It's like his entire world got crushed by a titan. Inko immediately starts asking if there's any way to give him a quirk. And the doctor says, not that we know of. So there's really nothing we can do. I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do. Deku's dad is frustrated at this and says, your machines must be wrong. They have to be. Both of us have a quirk. There's no way. And the doctor's like, sir, you came to the best quirk doctor in town. I'm sorry. Our machines are not broken in any way. So then Deku's dad thinks about the bone marrow he collected from the skull. So when they're on their way back home in the car, Deku's dad says, hey bud, I know you're upset. I'm a little upset too. How would you like to go on a camping trip? And Inko says, a camping trip? You didn't tell me you had this planned. I would love to go with you. And Deku says, yeah! And then Deku's dad says, no, it's just for us, just for the men of the house. You're always on vacation, Inko. So, how about you let the men of the house go on vacation? And Inko says, you wish. I'm the one always cleaning. I should get a vacation. Desk hoarder. And Deku's dad is like, I'm sorry that I haven't been on very many exhibition trips. So, Deku's dad decides to take him the week after. And, they get there, and Deku's like, yes, Dad, are we finally here? And Deku's dad is like, yes, we're here. And Deku, excitingly jumps out of the car and looks around to see they're in the middle of the forest, and they didn't bring any gear. Deku asks where they'll be sleeping, and Deku's dad says, follow me. As they start to walk for what feels like years, they finally get to a little spot. Just a small clearing. And Deku's dad says, I'm sorry. I didn't think that this would be necessary. And Deku is like, what do you mean, Dad? And then he says, remember the stories I used to tell you? And Deku says, yeah? What about them? They're real. as he pulls out the bone marrow and grabs Deku's arm. Deku starts to scream as Deku's dad puts the needle in his vein and injects the bone marrow into Deku's arm. Deku passes out. But what he didn't know was he turned into a titan. And at that very moment, Deku's dad remembered one key thing that he forgot that his mom told him in the stories. Titans only eat people. Deku's dad steps back as Deku starts reaching for him. Deku's dad starts screaming for Deku to stop as Deku grabs him and starts lifting him up towards his mouth. Deku's dad is screaming for help, screaming for Deku to stop, as it's too late. Deku plunges his dad into his mouth and closes. Blood is squirted everywhere. It's like a ketchup bottle being cut open. It's everywhere. Deku rips him in half as Deku drops the rest of his legs on the ground as he slurps up one of his father's intestines as the Titan falls on the ground. When Deku wakes up, he's in a haze. He's looking around to see nothing till he sees his father's legs, his blood, and one disturbing eyeball just laying there with no head in sight. Deku just sits there as he hears sirens in the distance, helicopters flying overhead. How long have I been out for? Is all he can think of. Then everything sets in. Deku screams at the top of his lungs as he notices that this is his dad's lower half that's just sitting there. And that's his dad's eyeball. That's his dad's blood. As Deku crawls over to his father's legs and starts crying and crying as he wonders what happened and why he passed out. All he remembers is just glimpses of his father saying, "I'm sorry," and that's it. Deku is just crying when the heroes show up. They ask him what happened, and Deku says, "I don't know. My dad said we were going on a fishing trip, or not on a fishing trip, on a camping trip, and we walked out here and then I passed out. I don't know what happened." Is he dead? The rescue hero pats him on the back as he tells the officers, or tells the police and rescue team that he found him. But there was a casualty. The ambulances, or the airlift finally arrives, and they airlift Deku out of there. As the police finally make it to the scene of the crime, they're disgusted at the amount of blood that was spilled everywhere. If 1 year goes by and they still haven't found out what happened to him. So one day, Deku is sitting down at the lunch table, just, minding his own business. Okay, like I was saying, he was minding his own business, eating his food, when all of a sudden he bites his tongue on accident, causing him to turn into a half. Dang motorcycles! Why are there so many motorcycles around? Like I was saying, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but there are motorcycles in the background, and they're really loud. So, yeah, like I was saying, Deku turns into a half Titan. Like, the Titan Deku turned into when he was trying to stop the cannon balls from hitting him, Mikasa, and Armin? That's basically what Deku just turned into, but a little bit of a smaller form. Deku starts looking around, and everyone else starts to scream and panic and run away as Deku's arm is just flailing around. All Deku can do is let out a freakish roar as the Titan's head falls clean off onto the same lunch table that Deku was a minute ago just sitting at. The teachers go in there and immediately realize that was where Deku was sitting, and call an ambulance, and they call the police. So the police send out, I'm gonna say, just for the heck of it, I'm gonna say they send out All Might. All Might arrives and sees a lot of steam in the room. As he starts walking, he finds what looks like a skeleton with a tiny piece of, with little patches of red meat on it, or muscle on it. The head is nowhere to be found, but when All Might's just investigating, he finds Deku sticking out of it. He immediately jumps up, grabs Deku, and pulls him out. But he notices something. He can't pull him out. So All Might, realizing that he has to use a percentage of his power, decides to use 20% of his power to pull him out. And he pulls, and then until eventually he finally pulls Deku out of the Titan. Deku is passed out. All Might's just kind of looking at Deku. He sees weird markings on him, and he looks malnourished. All Might wonders what just happened as the police finally arrive. All Might tells the officers to get an ambulance here, as when the ambulance arrives, the police call Inko. When Inko gets to the hospital, she screams, "Deku!" As she tries to run in there, the police stop her, and say, "Were you feeding your child?" And Inko says, "Yes, I was feeding my child. What, do I look like an abuser? What happened?" And then the officer is like, "Wait," and then Inko grabs the cop's shoulder, pulls him down, and says, "I'm the one asking questions." And the officer says, "Yes, ma'am." And then she pushes the officer and says, "What happened?" As All Might walks up to Inko. As All Might says, "There is no need to worry, because I am here." But Mrs. Inko, that is not very nice. It is not very hero-like to push an officer around. Inko is dumbfounded for why All Might was called. And All Might just keeps on asking, what happened? What happened? As Deku finally wakes up. Inko rushes over to Deku as she starts crying and asking what happened to him. As Deku says, all I remember is biting my tongue and then I passed out. And Inko says, a quirk? No, a pain-activated quirk? And then All Might says, speaking of quirks, what is your son's quirk? And Inko says, he doesn't have one. And All Might says, oh, I'm very sorry about that. So, All Might decides to drop it. And the officers, since no one was injured, they drop it as well. But from that point on, Deku knew he had something special, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. So Deku started training. He would go out every day into the same woods that his father was killed, and he would practice. He would run not a kilometer, but at least, well, since he was a kid, he would be supervised, and him and his mom would, just kind of walk the forest for a mile, then go back. But when he reached 7, that's when he started running the forest by himself. But of course, he had to wear a little tracker vest, so they knew where he was. So, one day, Deku's just kind of chewing on its nail when he accidentally bites his finger. And he transforms, and he breaks straight through the roof. Inko screams and calls 911 immediately. As Deku's just kind of looking around, he breaks through the building and just kind of stares down the road as he just starts walking across it. And a car, the driver screams as he crashes into Deku's foot. Deku, getting mad at this, crushes the car with his punch. Like, he punched the ground, but he punched the car, like, crushing it. Deku roars at the top of his lungs and keeps walking across the road. Cars keep on swerving out of the way as the police finally arrive to see a giant 15-meter thing walking across the road. They decide it would be best to call in the new hero, like literally the new hero, Mount Lady. So they call her in. Is Mount Lady bigger than Deku? I don't know. Tell me in the comment section. But I'm just going to say they're both around the same size. So Deku's, just kind of smashing buildings, and eventually Mount Lady arrives. And she says, yes, my first villain battle. You're going to wish you were never born. As she tries to punch Deku, but Deku grabs her fist and soccer punches her straight in the chin, punching her straight to the ground. Deku kicks her in the stomach and then grabs her by the hair and bites her right in the shoulder, and then pulls a piece of muscle right off of her arm, like right off of her shoulder. She screams in pain as Deku throws her to the ground and keeps destroying buildings. Mount Lady is angered at this, and she tries to go in and punch him, but Deku turns around and backhands her straight through a building. Deku roars at the top of his lungs as Mount Lady shrinks. She is KO'd. Deku starts walking down the interstate as they decide to call All Might. All Might arrives and he remembers this thing, or at least a piece of it. And he remembers it was supposedly caused by a kid. But he doesn't think it's the same kid, so All Might says, "Alright, I'm going to give you 2 outcomes. 1, you surrender and go to prison peacefully. Or 2, and Deku roars as All Might says, "Option 2 then." Deku tries to go in to punch him, but All Might quickly dodges and kicks Deku's arm, breaking it. And All Might lands on the ground and says, "It's not too late to pick option 1. Sorry if you can hear the kid over there. And then Deku roars at the top of his lungs again as his arm bends back into shape. All Might says, "Regeneration, huh? Impressive," as he jumps up and starts punching the crap out of Deku. And then, without realizing, All Might hits Deku with a 50% punch to the jaw, sending Deku flying across the bridge and literally crushing a few cars on the way. All Might realizes that he used too much power and quickly rushes to see if the person is alright. As Deku because basically the punch broke Deku's neck, so Deku basically breaks it back, or bends it back to where it should be. No, he pops it back to where it should be, and then he gets up as All Might's like, "Ooh, you're a tough one, aren't you?" And All Might decides he wants to finish this now. So he says, "Detroit, smash!" and hits Deku with an 100% punch to the stomach, sending Deku into the sky. All Might quickly launches into the sky and just starts laying down punch after punch after punch into Deku. And then All Might gets up above Deku and kicks him straight back down into the ground. Deku now has literally every bone in his body broken, as Deku lets off a bunch of steam as he starts to regenerate again. All Might is amazed at this person's regeneration, but says he has to finish it. So he walks up to Deku as a little chunk of Deku's hair is peeking out from the back of his head. He uses 100% to grab Deku's hair and pull him straight out of the Titan. All Might, realizing it is the same kid as before, drops him on the ground and quickly calls an ambulance for not only Mount Lady, but for the kid he just punched straight into next decade. Deku wakes up to be in restraints. They're asking him why he did it, what happened, and they just keep on berating him with questions. Deku says, "I don't know. All I know is I was chewing on my nail, and I accidentally bit my finger, and I passed out." And then All Might says, "Kid, you didn't pass out. You went on a rampage, doing hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages." And Deku says, "What? But I don't have a cork. How could I do something like that? And I was passed out. There was no way." And All Might says, "There was a way. 'Cause you did it." The cops want to arrest Deku and put him in juvie. But All Might stops them. And All Might lets Deku off with a warning. Deku, now having full confirmation that he has some kind of ability, never tries to chew on his nail, never always keeps his tongue strapped to the bottom of his mouth in case he bites it. Because now he knows if he does any self-inflicted damage, that he'll turn into something huge. So now we're going to skip to when Deku is in middle school. So the teacher is like, "Alright, kids, it's time for you to decide what you guys are going to do for in the future." And then the teacher's like, "Who cares? I know you all want to be heroes," as he throws the papers in the air. Everyone starts using their corks. Deku just kind of sits there quietly. When Bakugo says, "Don't put me in a class with any of these B-listers. I'm the only one worth getting into UA." As everyone starts throwing paper balls at Bakugo, the teacher leaves the classroom and everyone starts to get ready. As Bakugo's about to leave, he sees a paper on the teacher's desk. It says that Deku signed up for UA. Bakugo is furious at that and walks over to Deku and punches him and punches him and punches him right off of his seat. Bakugo says, "There's no way a corkless loser like you could ever make it in UA. You might as well take a swan dive off the roof if you're gonna try and sign up for UA. 'Cause hey, maybe in your next life, you'll have a cork and you would have already been signed up for UA. But don't stand in my way, Deku." As Deku says, "I'm going to UA, Bakugo. 'Cause guess what? You'll never make it as a..." And Bakugo picks Deku up by the collar, starts blowing off explosions in his other hand, and puts his hand on Deku's face and uses an explosion, like blowing Deku up into a wall. Deku's regeneration already starts, and steam starts to go off of him as his nose pops back into place. And the teeth that just got blown out pop back in. Well, they don't pop back in, but they grow back in. As Deku opens his mouth to let off a bunch of steam. Bakugo's wondering what just happened as Deku starts to walk out of the room. Bakugo says, "No, you don't," as he grabs Deku and slams him into a locker and throws him into the others. There's 2 rows of lockers. He just slammed Deku's face into one locker and threw him into another set of lockers. Bakugo grabs him by the shoulder and knees him straight in the back, breaking Deku's back. And then Deku falls on the ground in pain as he's been completely winded, he can't speak, and he's just gasping for air as he lets off a lot of steam, and Deku starts to breathe easily, and then Deku's back pops back into place. Deku starts to get up as Bakugo punches Deku onto the ground and says, "You'll never be a hero." And he kicks Deku's head, breaking Deku's neck. As Deku starts to lay off more steam. Bakugo's like, "Give it up," as he walks away. Deku leaves, and when he decides to take a shortcut when he finds the sludge villain. The sludge villain says, "You'll make a good target. Give me your body so I can escape from that wretched All Might." Deku says, "I'd rather not." As Deku decides that his training will pay off, as he bites his finger and turns into the Attack Titan. The sludge villain's like, "What? What are you?" As Deku slams his foot on the ground, laying off a humongous roar. The sludge villain decides, the bigger the target, the bigger the take. Your body will do nicely. As Deku just grabs the sludge villain, trying to pick him up, but he realizes it's just literally sludge, and he can't do anything. And the sludge villain's like, "What are you gonna do now?" As Deku starts to lay off a lot of steam, the sludge villain starts realizing how hot it is. And the sludge villain says, "Why did it get so hot in here? And where'd all the steam come from?" As Deku sneaks around the steam, blowing steam everywhere. The sludge villain's looking around, not even knowing how to navigate in this, because it's like thick steam. You can't see anything. Visibility is like literally right in front of you. Like, if you were to put your hand in front of your eyes right now, like literally to where it touches your nose, that's how far you can see in this. So, sludge villain's just looking around, and then All Might arrives. And All Might says, "I am here." And the sludge villain's like, "What? Impossible!" As the steam starts to go away, Deku and All Might decides to do a Detroit smash on the sludge villain, and Deku goes in to punch the sludge villain as well. All Might says, "Detroit smash!" And both All Might and Deku punch the sludge villain at the same time, turning the sludge villain into just like a little puddle of goo. As All Might picks up a jar from off the street and scoops him up and closes the lid. Deku, breaks himself out as he starts to gasp for air. All Might remembers this kid and says, "You're the same kid who went on a rampage all those years ago." And Deku says, "Yeah." And All Might says, "It's good to know that you learned how to control it." And Deku says, "Yeah, it really is." So All Might's about to jump off, and then Deku stops him and asks, "Can I be a hero without a quirk?" And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where I'm going to leave this episode off. I hope you guys did indeed enjoy. And once again, thank you to my stream moderators. So yeah, I hope you all have an amazing day. So, peace out.